It's Rode versus Zoom in a battle that I've been trying to set up for a year now, and I can finally say, let's do this. Now, before I pit these two in a battle for supremacy, we should go over all that the Zoom PodTrak P8 offers. If you want my full comprehensive review of the RODEcaster Pro, you can check that out up here. Of course, there's one massive upgrade to that video, as the RODEcaster Pro now offers proprietary multi-track drivers, so ignore my single complaint in that video. I now love almost everything about it. Now then, on to the Zoom offering. The PodTrak P8 offers much the same as other Zoom products. Yes, it is plastic. No, it does not really feel cheap. The teeny tiny screen that was on the P4 and the L8, and frankly, almost every other Zoom device is gone, and I can say thank God for that. The inputs, they feel fine. There's no extraneous movement in them. The faders and knobs, much the same, with a nice feel and resistance when you're moving them, so you feel like you have a level of control. It comes in a tad smaller than the RODEcaster Pro, so if desk space is a premium for you, there is that. This board has a sample rate and resolution of 44:1 and 16-bit. It has 6 mic preamps that have 70 dB of gain and a total of 8 inputs with 2 coming out the other end. Now, you can record straight to the unit. It does accept SDHC or SDXC cards, and in case you're wondering, that goes all the way up to 512 gigs. It has a USB-C connection, although it's only USB 2.0 connectivity, which is starting to confuse me in 2021. There's a frequency response of 20 Hz to 20 kHz and an EIN of -124 dBu, which will be featured just a bit later. It weighs in at just over 4.5 pounds for anyone looking for the on-the-go experience. Also, this can be battery powered either through the USB-C port with a battery bank or through 4 AA batteries in the bottom. That said, the 4 AA's aren't going to last you all that long if you're out in the go, so I would suggest a battery bank if you are doing some on-the-road stuff. So for features, let's take a walk around the board. At the top, you have those 6 XLR inputs and the color-coded selectors under them that allow you to choose Phantom. You're also going to notice Channel 6 has an added option of making it USB pass-through channel for interviews through your computer. Has a big 4.3-inch color touchscreen for multiple uses, and an easy menu system that doesn't confuse. Here, you can do a lot of cool stuff, including assigning the sound pads, introducing some processing to the audio, or even editing the audio. Yes, that is one of the biggest and coolest features of this thing. It allows you to edit a single track of audio. Now, when you do edit, you're editing the stereo mix channel, not multi-track editing, which is a bit of a bummer, but I do kind of get it. It's still bloody impressive, though. Let's get the rest of the board covered, and we'll come back for some of the other included features. Below the screen, you're going to see 2 buttons per channel, the mute button and this on-air button. Now, that on-air button is an interesting inclusion. It will mute the output of everything except headphones when off. So if you're using this for a live stream and you're in commercial, or perhaps you're having an off-air chat for some reason, that's a really cool option. Basically, the ability to turn the mic off, but still be able to talk to your co-hosts or guests. Below that, you have the faders. Now, they do feel good with just a touch of resistance to them, and you're going to notice they are color-coded as well to reduce confusion when you're live. Now, back up to the top and over to the right, you're going to see some other inputs. This is a TRRS jack for phone calls, and much like the P4, you can use a Bluetooth connector for bringing guests on your show. Below that, you have the 9 sound pads. Now, they're preloaded, or you can easily throw audio onto them, and of course, there are multiple banks, so you can have up to 36 sounds loaded in for a podcast. Then back up to the monitoring section, you have 2 1/4-inch TRS outs for those of you that have monitors. And below that, 6 headphone jacks with individual volume knobs, once again color-coded, a very cool feature. Now, then you have a master audio USB out knob as well as a volume control knob for the monitors, which if you saw the L8 video, you'll know that is the one thing that really annoyed me on the L8, which bummed me out big time. Now, below that, you have the transport buttons for playback. One thing of note that I want to point out is this marker button, a massive feature so that if there's an event that you want to take out, you can mark it while you're recording and find it easily in post. If you're trying to remember some of the funniest or most impactful moments from a podcast for clips, this will be a massive time saver. Now, on the back of the unit, all you have is a power switch, USB-C connectivity, again, only USB 2.0, and an SD slot. Now let's look at some of those customization features. In the top left-hand side of the screen, you're going to see the red microphone button. That is access to all your files, as well as a way in to edit them. Now, it is a cool feature to have, though it is somewhat limited. You can trim tops and bottoms, as well as just selecting a massive audio to save. Individual edits seem to be a massive pain on this thing and not really possible. It would be nice to be able to select certain parts of a conversation to delete it, maybe the ums and the ahs. A few other things from the screen though. You can also transfer from here or combine a bunch of the tracks into one. Below that, you're going to see you have controls for each microphone. Here, you have the limiter, low-cut filter, both of which have no control, just on or off. Under that, you'll have a very simple EQ, which we'll go over what it sounds like in a bit. And then below that, you have a compressor/de-esser with minimal control as well. I'm not the biggest fan at the lack of control on this, but I'm sure that's going to come up when comparing this to the RODEcaster Pro. One thing of note here, for the controls on the phone, you will only have treble and bass to play with there, just so you know. Now back to the top, you have a button to set the date and time, and an SD button that has some obvious controls. Also, there's a power button up here. Do note, if you're using this with batteries, you want to select the type of battery you have in there if you want feedback on how much is left. Also included there is a tablet mode, as this board cannot be powered by a tablet or phone, as well as this brightness slider. Okay, then back to the bottom for the sound pad controls. Here you can set any sound to a pad. But weirdly enough, you can't actually change the color of the pad here. This is only done on the actual audio back in the first settings menu I showed you. So that means all of the preloaded sounds are a default white, and I was unable to figure out how to change that. That said, any sounds you do load in, you can change the colors. This is my first really big gripe with this machine. Let me change the color of the pad. I don't care about the color of the audio. Okay, then finally on this screen, the on-air button, which has one of the best features on this board. It's the noise reduction feature. Considering most podcasts are recorded in areas that are not ideal studios, this is a fantastic feature. The only thing I would prefer is if you could apply it to individual channels, but still, it's fantastic. Also, there is the ability to save your files with or without the included processing, or not save them at all, which is kind of a scary feature and makes me think you might want to check that before hitting record. Okay, let's take a look at some of the drawbacks to the PodTrak P8. This thing is pretty feature-rich, but there are some pretty big issues here. The fact that you can only record at 44:1 and 16-bit, that's kind of problematic. The added dynamic range to 24-bit is a big oversight for sure, especially in certain situations. And if you have a video component to your podcast, the 44:1 may be a syncing issue for your longer podcasts, though you can upsample in post. Though upsampling is never the best option. Having 48K sample rate is much preferable. And lastly, the biggest issue that I'm going to take with this board is the lack of multi-tracking ability. Now, of course, when recording right to the device, you get all the tracks separated, which is great. But when using this as an interface, it's just a stereo file. Now, of course, you could set it up with ASIO for all, but the idea of having third-party drivers for a machine at this price point is just sad. There should be multi-track support for this as an interface. And the fact that the LiveTrak L8 actually does have multi-track support and this doesn't is another slap in the face, considering the price differential. Big oof. Okay, before we do the tests, let's just put these things side by side and see if we can find a winner. First up, we should talk price. There is a difference between the two, and that is the first win for the P8, hands down. For build quality, I think this one, it's a straight up win for the Rode. Much better chassis, not plastic. I mean, the zoom isn't horrible, but an aluminum body should win every time, right? Outside of that, everything is a bit of a tie for build quality. Buttons, faders, and knobs. Okay, then let's look at specs. It has to go to Rode as well. Now, the P8 does have more inputs. That's kind of where it stops. Honorary mention does go out to the P8 for the gain. 70 dBs will be more than enough for any microphone, and that's really cool. It's pretty quiet gain as well, which isn't bad. The sample rate and the bit depth, though, are disappointing from Zoom, and honestly, the lack of multi-track ability just sends it over the edge. Sadly, with that, it's just not enough to get the P8 a win in the specs category. Features is next, and this one is actually closer than you might think. The big one for the P8 is the noise reduction. For the Rode, it's a processing. The P8 does allow some kind of editing on the actual unit, but that needs some updating to be a feature that will sway you. So I guess it comes down to the processing here. Let's take a listen to that. Okay, so here we have the SM7B plugged directly into the Zoom PodTrak P8. Doesn't have any processing within here, no processing on my end in post. These are the levels I'm getting, and I'm set to what looks to be the unity mark on the faders. Now, if we were to go into the settings for the microphone, you can see we have a limiter. Now, I'm not being too loud here. However, if I were to turn this up, there's a chance I would be able to overload this, which I'm not even doing that. Wow. But that limiter would avoid yellers, screamers. I have other people in the house, so I'm not going to do that. Doesn't make any difference to what I've got. This is the low cut. Now you can see what the low cut does. It takes out the low end. So low cut filter. Low cut filter off. Low cut filter on. Now let's turn on the tone. So let's go all the way to the bottom. This is me with the bassiest of voices. Remember, this is the SM7B, and this is the treble. Now, I do like to add a little bit of presence to my voice, so we can bring it up just a little bit right there. Cool. And this is the compression de-esser. Now, let's turn that off all the way. And when you turn that on, what that's going to do is it's going to de-ess just a little bit, but it's also going to compress, and it's going to make a little bit of a fuller sound. Now, it's at minimum. This is what happens when you turn it all the way up to the top. I do not like this. It sounds heavily processed. No, I don't like that. With just a little bit on, I don't mind it. I'm very essy, so I don't mind the little bit of a de-esser. I find the compression to be meh, but this is the sound of it with the full experience of the post-processing, if you will, or the inline processing that the PodTrak P8 has. I also want to hear the sound of the preamps when this goes full. Okay, so I'm going to be quiet here. Okay, there we go. Now let's take a look at the RODEcaster Pro and see whether or not I have better sound. Now we're over on the RODEcaster Pro. So let's just bring this up here. Now, the first thing we'll do, we'll listen to the preamps. Okay, so let's take a look at this microphone post-processing. I'm not going to bother going one by one. Everyone's gone through all the audio processing that you can do on a RODEcaster Pro. You all know what it is. Let's just turn it on. My goodness. I don't really like the oral exciter. I find I'm a little too essy for it, even with the de-esser in place. I also find this really aggressive. Maybe don't need the big bottom or the oral exciter. That's a little bit better. I don't mind that. I find with the oral exciter on and the big bottom on, it's a bit too much of me. And I think it's a little, I feel like it feels a bit fake. Now, you'll notice I'm getting some really good levels out of this. And I don't have this thing past half, which means that I'm not activating the preamps quite as much as you would with it all the way up. But you do notice there's that heavy drop off when I stop talking, which it sonically bothers the hell out of me. I hate that. I don't like that sound. Turn off the big bottom and the oral exciter. A little bit of it goes away. It's because of that presence in the oral exciter that when it kind of drops off, when that presence drops off, I don't like it. Now, of course, what that is the noise gate. You can hear that noise come back, right? This is the sound of the RODEcaster Pro. What do you think? Which one's better? All right, let's just be clear here. These are basically two companies attempting to reduce the learning curve for recording audio. Really, they've boiled it down to dumb shit simple. And that's a really good thing. Get your audio done now and work on some of the learning curve stuff later. That said, though, with the price differential between these two units, you expect there to be something left on the table when you go with the P8. I mean, the all-plastic chassis, that's fine. I can live with that. I've owned many Zoom products in the past and it's never bothered me. But when you start getting into fundamental stuff like sample rate, bit depth, and multi-tracking, the price difference just becomes less of an issue. For an extra few bucks, I would gladly pay for those options. So that's it. Look at me making nice with all the Rode fanboys. The RODEcaster Pro is the outright winner in this challenge, hands down. But I will say this, if Zoom is actually able to make those changes to this board, sample rate, bit depth, and multi-tracking ability as an interface, this would come out quite a bit different. Because with those things, the price difference isn't worth slightly better processing and an aluminum body. So what did you think? Did I get it right? Let me know down in the comments. Cheers. I will see you in the next video.